Well, hello, and welcome to episode 5 of The Wine List, which is, I'm sure you know by now, is a podcast for people who, when presented with a wine list, go, right, yes, yeah, what do you fancy? Whereas what they really want to do is pick out the perfect wine for the perfect food for the perfect occasion, but don't quite necessarily have the knowledge or confidence to do so. And I'm in that position. My name is Oliver Turnbull, and the gentleman who has helped me so far up to episode 5 to start to understand wine, where it's come from, how it's made, and how to choose a good one is my friend of a third of a century, Mr. Richard Lane.
Oliver, hi there, or rather, good day.
Did you say good day?
Might have done.
I wonder why. Oh, such teases.
Good stuff. Oh, yes. Episode 5. So terrific. Getting on for halfway through series 1. You know, I'm sure there'll be dozens of series after this. Last time we spoke, you were just about to show the Riesling from Ep 4 to your good lady wife, Louise.
Yes, exactly. And I said, Louise, I thought we might have a Riesling with our sushi tonight because I know you bought sushi. And she went, that's Richard's idea, right? And I was like, yes, and hung my head. But she was very impressed that I'd thought ahead to pair wine with food. And so we sat down quite late in the evening, but still quite light. Got the sushi out with the old chopsticks and the Riesling. And I'd warned her that it was a sweet white wine. And do you know what? It worked perfectly, even with the accoutrements, with the ginger and the pickle and the lovely fresh fish on the rice and the rolls, the California rolls. It really was beautiful. You know, I'd been unsure about that sweet Riesling up until that point. I really liked the flavours, but the sweetness was something I wasn't used to. But something about the flavours of the sushi cut through a bit of that sweetness. And I don't think it was my imagination that they were a great combination. So thank you, Dr. Lucen, for suggesting that. A very positive experience and a good experiment.
Well, I'm delighted. I didn't quite get the same reception here.
Oh.
In my household, admittedly, we didn't pair it up with sushi or anything like that. I said to Liz, there's a bit of Riesling left. It's medium sweet. Give it a go. Sure, okay, give it a go. And then I saw her later on. She said, not sure I really like that wine. I thought it was just sort of glorified lemonade, really. I thought, oh, well.
Ouch.
The point is, everyone's tastes are different. You cannot say categorically that a wine is fantastic because beauty is in the eye or tongue or mouth of the beholder. In this case, actually, it's a good call for doing some food pairing with it, which is something we hadn't been doing and we apologised a bit for in episode 4. But now we're thinking about it and you've tried it. I think that's terrific.
That's right. I mean, I was obviously keen to like it, so that helped. And I think there's also associations as well. You know, if you have an association with a particular taste and you have that taste again, I think that can really help you enjoy a wine. And I suppose I feel that when I taste a claret and can remember home. Anyway, so that was good. But now we move on to episode 5. Are you going to reveal the name you've chosen, Rich?
I will indeed, Ol. Episode 5 is entitled Brave New Worlds.
Is this an excuse for you to get your violin out and play War of the Worlds? That classic Jeff Wayne and his orchestra.
Well, I could do, and I will certainly, I'm sure, at some point get the old fiddle out at some point to maybe link some passages in this ep. More importantly, this episode is obviously looking at worlds as in this slightly old-fashioned concept these days, really, of the old world and the new world. Obviously, by new world, we're talking about countries outside Europe and particularly the Southern Hemisphere and United States of America and Canada. Obviously, in the South, we're talking about Chile, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. I really want to focus on Australia, not at the absolute exclusion of all the others. We have obviously touched on New Zealand in episode 1. Chile, of course, we have covered in episode 2. So I thought, actually, let's have a look at Australia because the Australian wine story is so interesting and fascinating, the marketing and the brilliance of their wines.
Ah, yes, our Australian friends and cousins. Gotta love them.
Well, you have really. You've been there once, haven't you all?
Yeah, I have. Lovely place, lovely people. Interesting. Felt a long way from home. It was about 1997 with my now wife. Lovely. But you must have been there decent stay, actually. You've got family out there and stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. One of my sisters, Caroline, naturalised Australian, married an Australian man. I have a lovely daughter who's Australian, of course. They live out in Sydney, and I first went out there in 1999. Looking back on it, I realise now, it was in Australia in 1999 that was actually the scene of my first winery visit ever, in an area called the Hunter Valley, which is in New South Wales, sort of a couple of hours up from Sydney. We went up there, stayed in a log cabin and tasted lots of wine, and I knew nothing about it, but had a great time. And funnily enough, I was just digging around on the computer, and you wouldn't believe it, I found some audio that I took on my rather primitive audio recording machine.
Really?
Yeah, from 22 years ago. And it's a little bit scratchy and there's a little bit of background noise, but I just want to play a tiny clip because there was a nice Australian lady in our group. We did a winery tour where you get driven around all the wineries in a minibus. The only way to do it, obviously, so everyone can enjoy having a sip. And I met this lovely lady called Loretta Martin, who comes from Canberra. She found some book in the winery and she read a bit to me, and listen to what she says.
It says wine, the cleverest thing God invented after sex. Wine lasts longer, causes infinitely less trouble.
Hilarious. So that's what he invented after 6. What did he invent before 6? Or 6 p.m, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, I must admit, when I listened to that back again, having almost forgotten about meeting her 22 years ago, yeah, I thought, well, what did God invent during the daytime? But I do believe she's referring to SEX, not SIX. And, and it's better than, SEX and sex because of its enduring quality and lasting, oh, ho, 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 and all the rest of it. So,
oh, how very ribald. Mind you, that's a good old Aussie woman.
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
one.
she was great.
Let's refer back to the old wine list. That's the name of the podcast. And so I've got the old Chez Bruce.
Bruce's wine list. I will guarantee, I don't know, but I'm sure there are a fair few Aussie wines on there.
Yeah, not bad. Half a page of white. So the white page is in front of me now. And they split it. And I think you won't be surprised about this. They split it 3 ways. The first is Victoria and Tasmania. Tons of Chardonnay and 1 Marsanne. And then South Australia is more of a mixture. A Semillon there, there's a Riesling there, there is another Chardonnay. And then Western Australia, there's only one from Western Australia, which is also a Chardonnay. So I guess you'd expect that split, would you?
Yeah, pretty much so. We're talking about the southern states of Australia, which ties in with our 30-50. The fact you mentioned Chardonnay again is no great surprise because Australia's winemakers, they make many, many white wines, but Chardonnays, they are absolutely fantastic at making. They come in many different styles. And Margaret River down in Western Australia, they make a lovely, quite ripe, kind of peachy sort of Chardonnay down there. So that all sounds good. What about the reds?
So the reds, there's more of them. So this is page 26. Remember how large this wine list is. I tell you what, in the old days it would intimidate me. Now I'm just like, I'm going to dive in because I know a little bit about this now. So New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania is one area. Has some great wines on there like the Timo Meyer from Bloody Hill. Fantastic. Bindi wines and a curly flat. Oh, I'd love a curly flat, mate. This is fantastic. They're all Pinot Noirs. Western Australia, the second region, they have a Shiraz. Interesting for us because we are about to taste one. And then one mixture of 4 grapes, including Merlot, Malbec, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv. And then South Australia has a few, and they're dominated by Grenache. And there's also a Shiraz in South Australia as well. So again, divided in a way you'd expect, I suppose, Rich.
Yeah, that all sounds pretty good. Glad there's a Shiraz on there. All very cool, all. So yeah, the wine list looks good. I suppose I better introduce the wines that we're tasting tonight. They're all 2019. Hopefully everyone knows what they are because they're on the website and we've flagged them at the end of the last ep. But very simply, we are going to be tasting a white wine first, which is going to be a Viognier Marsanne blend called the Hermit Crab. That comes from a great producer in South Australia called D'Arenberg. And then later on, we're going to explore, as Oz just said, we're going to explore the Shiraz, contrasting with the Syrah. Well, it's the same thing from France. We're going to be comparing a 2019 Syrah from Northern Rhone with a 2019 Aussie Shiraz. So those are our wines. But we cannot start tasting until we know that Ol has done his homework. So while I gave you a little bit of homework to do, it really sets the scene for the rest of this episode because actually it's a little trip back in time. It's going back 45 years to 1976, but something important happened also. In about a minute, without deviation or hesitation, would you like to tell us about the Judgement of Paris?
We seem to have turned from just a minute and also back to my prep school days where Mr. Newman would do exactly what you've done, Rich, which is evil. So we can all get on, boys, and do something enjoyable if Turnbull can prove he's done his homework. Over to you, Turnbull. And then 20 pairs of nasty eyes looking at me because they want to play football or cricket or something. And if I haven't done my homework, I get my head smashed against a wall afterwards. But anyway, Mr. Newman / Rich, you lose because I've done my homework in some degree of detail because it was an assignment like you always give me, is an assignment that you think I like, and I love this one because it's a competition and it has sort of an unexpected twist, which you might be able to predict given the nature of the episode. But anyway, the Judgement of Paris was the brainchild of a gentleman called Mr. Stephen Spurrier, a Brit wine merchant who was a massive fan of French wine, and his friend, or his associate, I suppose, Patricia Gallagher. And his idea was, as the old world was renowned for producing the finest wines to humanity, but the new world was coming through in the mid-70s, he thought he would conduct an experiment, a blind experiment, if you like, using judges of renown in the wine industry to see how, in a blind test, the new world wines would do against the old world wines, which sounds like a fabulous thing to do. And this is, remember, Rich, 1976, so 45 years ago. You know, one has to go back to that time when the new world would have seen even more of an upstart, if you like, than
definitely.
than it is at the moment. So it's sort of old-fashioned, semi kind of Ryder Cup format, really, where you had 10 red wines and 10 white wines. They were all mixed up, some from the USA and some from France. Of course, it's a blind test, so the judges didn't know which wine was which. And there were 11 judges, all of them French. Very interesting point, with the exception of Stephen himself, who was a French wine enthusiast, and Patricia Gallagher. They all did the blind test. 10 wines of red variety, 10 wines of the white variety, and guess what happened?
Go on, tell me. I don't know.
Well, in the white wine section, extraordinarily, a Chateau Montelena, sounds kind of French, is not French. It's an American wine of a vintage of 1973, so a 3-year-old white wine won the competition for the white wines, which was absolutely unheard of. The French were up in arms, as you can possibly imagine. A white wine from the New World, specifically American, has turned out to be the best of 10 white wines, which are a mixture of French and American. So that was absolutely astonishing, and no one could believe it. And everyone thought, well, that must be the end of the story. That's the big story here. But no. Can you believe when the results came through on the red wine side? I think you know what's coming. An American wine from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, again vintage 1973, with 127.5 points, won the red wine category as well, Rich.
Wow, Stag's Leap, California, just to say, yeah, absolutely true. And it's no exaggeration to say it shook the wine world. I mean, we were barely out of short trousers all at that point. But it is interesting. I think they've even made films about this. Great summary, if I may say so. Well, I think it's fair to say Turnbull's done his homework. Let's all go and play cricket.
It was literally like that. What a horrible man. But he wouldn't have done what you did, Rich. Mr. Newman would have gone, sorry, Turnbull, I think you'll find it's pronounced Montelena. Therefore, everybody now has to do lines. And feel free to hit Turnbull with your wooden rulers, which they were.
I know, I can't. Anyway, yes, let's not go on about corporal punishment during our school days, because we're sounding even older than we are. Really kick-started what happened, or really, in reality, didn't really start happening until the following decade, the 1980s, which was the revolution, where the New World suddenly got on the front foot with confidence and started making brilliant wine. Australia, that we're focusing on this evening, being the great example of that. In the mid-80s, they did lots of research, they spoke to wine experts, they went to London wine fairs and things and did a bit of kind of market research and realised that if they used their climate correctly and their skills of viticulture and winemaking, they could produce delicious wines. Not just that, put them in a bottle with a label that consumers could understand. It would say, for example, shock horror, the grape variety in the wine, which you wouldn't always get with French labelling, as you know. Often they would be marketed with really funky labels and funky names and things that we remember probably from the 80s and 90s, things like Jacob's Creek, you remember, of course.
Very popular.
And actually it was very much a commercial way in which Australia, using the Australian example again, kind of marketed themselves. It wasn't just that they were good at making wine. They were really, really good at marketing their wine. And again, this is something that conventionally, historically, particularly in France, there was a kind of slight sniffiness about marketing and business and stuff. It was kind of assumed that, you didn't need to do that. It was all about producing beautiful wines. And why do we need to go and market them? And we'll find out what our customers or consumers want.
Yeah, you've really got to hand it to the Aussies, actually. Good on them. I mean, it's a great culture down there of sort of laid backness and stuff, but they really did a number in terms of, like you say, they're not just a really good product, but also the great marketing of it. Australian wines were, there wasn't sort of that, that's a bit weird, an Australian wine, because I guess they were one of the first from the old world. I was looking at the old 30-50. There's a lot of Australia not in the 30-50 band. I suppose they got around that with their burgeoning knowledge of terroir.
Well, indeed. And although you could argue in some senses, I'm not saying that Australians are not interested in terroir, they certainly are, but they're not hung up about it. Obviously, you've got to be judicious about where you're doing your viticulture, and you need cooling influences that we discussed in episode 2. Coastal breezes are really important. Altitude is really important. I mean, the top area, I suppose, in Australia, if you just had to nail one area, would be the Barossa Valley, which is just up from Adelaide. So, I mean, for example, Riesling we were tasting last night, you can make that, even though it's a cool climate variety, hence Germany and Moselle last time. You can make it in Australia, but you need to be at altitude, so you need cool breezes, so like the Clare Valley or Eden Valley in South Australia. But of course, the other great thing about Australia is it is sunny, and you can ripen your fruit very, very well, but without wanting to over ripen them, of course, because as you know, that's not a great thing, because you end up with just sort of jammy, slightly simplistic wines.
Or too quickly, right?
Or too quickly. Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about how quickly they started to dominate the New World, or at least be a major player in the New World. I mean, if you look at the figures that you dug out, 1984, 9 million litres. It's hard to understand how much that is, but it doesn't sound massive. It's sort of 9.6 million Aussie dollar export. And then just 20 years later, 2004, from 9 million to 575 million litres exported, worth Australian dollars 2.55 billion. So that's, a few hundred more in 20 years, which is incredible.
Let's look at our white wine.
Let's do it. This is got a grape in it that I am familiar with and I know I like.
Good. Well, tell us what you know about this wine, Ol, and what it looks like, and let's do the old sniffometer, salivometer, and tasteometer.
Great. I'll just turn on my readometer. So this is an good old Australian wine, the Hermit Crab. I also like the names of Australian wines as well. They're sort of down to earth and a bit quirky and a bit, I'll just have a glass of the Hermit Crab. You got the crabs there, so you might, and you can imagine the humour. But this is a Viognier Marsanne. McLaren Vale is where it's from, 2019. So it's a blend of Viognier and Marsanne. Viognier I'm aware of and really like, so I'm looking forward to this.
Good. Yes, and a nice linkage here for this ebb is that both Viognier and Marsanne, lovely white varieties, herald from, historically, the Northern Rhone, as in Syrah and Shiraz that we're going to taste in a bit. So very much a link today is Northern Rhone and Australia. Viognier, most people know, a lot of people know it. It's often very peachy, very apricotty. It can be quite kind of a bit lush, do you know what I mean? It can be quite broad in the mouth. It's often got quite good weight, and it's quite aromatic, quite peachy. Marsanne is also lovely and very lemony. One can be lemon curdy and with a lovely oily texture. So I'm hoping the wine, this blend, is going to be super. It should have a really, really nice texture, and I'm guessing there'll be a little bit of acidity possibly to make sure that it's not too wide or flabby in the mouth. We're about to find out. But tell me the appearance of our Hermit Crab from McLaren Vale. Darenberg is the producer, 2019. Is it lemony or is it more a bit goldy?
I have just unscrewed the top of the bottle because we know that screw tops are every bit as good as cork, if not better. And this, I would say, is lemony. Yeah, lemony. Very pale.
Let's get the nose on this straight away, because you're the expert now, so let's crack straight into it.
I put a bit too much in the glass, actually. That was a bit silly. So my swirling is substandard this week. But, I like that. God, I can see your peaches immediately. There are tones of the Viognier that I like, and I cannot describe it, but I would definitely recognise it. I'll try to describe it. I want to say sort of silk clothing, but that doesn't seem to have at all. No, it's lovely, really nice. You might almost say floral.
I think you can say floral, and that's a good thing to say. And I think you've definitely, within that floral thing, I'm picking up a bit of honeysuckle on the nose. It's like the bush outside our back door in the garden here.
Yeah, there is something that I do get that. I remember we had honeysuckle at our house in oodles. So, and the lemon curd you said, I see why you're saying that, and the tropical fruits. Can I have a sip now?
Go for it. I'll go.
Thank you. Really nice. I think I like it better than an ordinary Viognier. There's a whole fruity feel. I can just feel it's like a cross between a peach and a sort of nectarine kind of flavour in my mouth. Lovely, really nice. It fills my mouth with this lovely flavour.
It is absolutely gorgeous. It really is mouth-filling. Nice acidity as well, because with Viognier and Marsanne, but potentially it could be a bit oily, as I was alluding to earlier, and maybe a bit flabby in the mouth. But it's a wonderful, refreshing acidity about this wine, plus the lemon, and it's like a lemon curd, I'd say. It's quite a concentrated lemon, with the peach and apricot and nectarine, brilliant call all that you mentioned. Totally get that, with the lovely kind of floral flavours as well. It is absolutely delicious. This guy at D'Arenberg, he's called Chester Osborne. He's a very charismatic, flamboyant winemaker. I'm delighted that, these winemakers who can sell their wines for a lot of money will make a wine that is affordable. Okay, this is our most expensive wine this evening, but it's £11.50. That's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not excessive for a good quality wine, I would say.
I have news. The news is sometimes the aftertaste of a Viognier I don't like particularly, but this seems to give you a sort of fruity aftertaste bonus. And what did you say? Did you say full in the mouth? It's only ever been what describes a punch in previous. But
yeah.
I get it, I think, what you're saying.
There's a bit of weight. It's not really heavy in the mouth. It's not like a Sauvignon Blanc, which is quite light in the mouth and steely or shabbily. There's definitely more weight here, I would say.
Yeah, I can see that in terms of the intensity of the flavour, but it's such a lovely flavour as well. I'm sort of trying to imagine why they've created this blend. It seems to possibly make the best of both grapes, which I suppose is the the idea of blending.
That's the idea of blending, and blending is incredibly important. Absolutely right.
What an incredibly difficult job, Rich. I mean, do these people become sort of superstars, like superstar DJs who are pretty good at sort of mixing and stuff?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good to create analogy mixing on the old decks.
Yeah.
The answer is a very few do become sort of superstars. But the average winemaker are just incredibly passionate, hard-working people. And sometimes they're involved in the viticulture as well as the winemaking. And, so they're kind of grape farmers and winemakers, some of them, small outfits. They won't have someone managing the outside and someone else doing the winemaking. Sometimes it's the family doing the thing,
It's such a personal thing. You put your personal stamp on it. With your grapes, your mix, your curation, your caring for the crop.
Exactly.
It must be incredible. I suppose that's your reward.
Exactly. And by the way, I haven't sipped the hermit crab for about 2 minutes, and I can still taste it in my mouth. It's just so wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. That might be my favourite of the series, Rich. I really love it. And I'm doing a bit of an acid test, bit of acidity there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, definitely.
But not ridiculous.
Yeah, I doubt you're salivating very much. I think it's probably medium, maybe just over medium acidity. It's not high, like with the Riesling and the Sauvignon Blanc from episode 1. Enough acidity to make it refreshing. Well done, Chester Osborne, D'Arenberg, Hermit Crab, 2019 Viognier Marsanne blend.
Good on you.
£11.50, good value, I would say. What else have you dug out about Australia?
Well, just a few figures about how much they contribute to the world economy of wine, the world wine economy, which is quite impressive, actually. But it's interesting. I mean, I like numbers, as you know, and it only really makes sense if you can compare them with other countries. But just as a comparison, if you were sort of to divide the cake, there's about 30 billion bottles, I believe, of wine created worldwide. Australia is responsible for about 1 billion of those. So if you compare Italy, which is the biggest wine producer in the world, at about 5 billion, it gives you sort of idea of scale of the old world versus the new. So Italy, Spain and France, the big three, as they're probably not called in the wine world.
Let's call them that, because that's what they are, definitely.
Well, they are certainly very, very big. They contribute about half of that 30 billion, 5-ish each, with the biggest one of those being Italy. The interesting thing is that of all the big New World countries, I guess you'd probably say Argentina, Chile, South Africa, Australia, they all contribute about 1 billion as well, the same as Australia, and about 20% of the big ones, with the US being a bit different. We're not going to be talking too much about them in this episode, but we will not be ignoring them. They're just over 2 billion. So that sort of gives you an idea. The whole market is dominated. 50% of the whole world market is the big three. But there's an enormous amount coming from the New World, 1 billion litres from each of Argentina, Australia, South Africa, Chile, and then the US contributes 2 as well. So not bad.
Excellent, Ol. So the stats are interesting and the stats are certainly impressive, but let's get to the heart of what we're doing here, which is getting your palate razor sharp again and looking at these 2 red wines. You've got them poured, I hope. If you could put the French Syrah on the left and the Australian Shiraz on the right. Again, just a reminder to everyone, these are Wine Society, UK Wine Society wines. Both of these, again, like the Hermit Crab, 2019, screw caps. The French Syrah, which comes from the Northern Rhone, £7.95. And the Society's Australian Shiraz, 2019, £8.50. Oliver, of course, is going to be able to detect the 55 pence differential of quality between the 2 wines. Any difference in appearance?
No, I don't think so. It's a little bit like when you're having your eyes tested. They say which one sticks out more.
This or this?
Could you do it again? This or this? One more time. This or this?
Okay, I assume they're deep ruby, are they all?
They are certainly deep ruby, and yeah, I can't tell the difference between them, frankly.
Do you know anything about Syrah or Shiraz? I know you're not really a red wine drinker. I mean, you tend to have a glass of white when we go out. I mean,
right.
Historically, I know that's all about to change. Do you know much about Syrah / Shiraz?
No, not at all. I only learnt recently they were the same grape, thank God. Yet another thing that's going to not embarrass me when I'm choosing wine.
Well, let's give these 2 wines side by side a good sniff.
Not a million miles away from the Côte de Rhône, if my nose serves me correctly. Oh, they are different though.
Slightly peppery smell in the French wine.
A little bit. I mean, my first
Spicy.
There's something I want to say chemically about the Australian one, but I don't mean chemically in a bad way, in a sort of organic way.
I know what you mean. It does. There's something slightly clinical about the right-hand one.
It's not unpleasant clinical, but there's something about my chemistry set that comes to mind.
Interesting. Okay. But my only observation really is that the left one particularly, I'm getting sort of a pepperiness and a slight spiciness.
Yeah. Yes. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And let's go to the palate. Let's taste.
Yes.
Let's taste the Syrah first, the French Syrah.
French first. Blimey. Oh, well, I know when to look out for tannin, and I'm getting tons of it.
Right.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of tannin. That's tanniny. And is it unpleasant? It's very sort of sticky, sticks to your mouth, but it's tanniny. Not unpleasant. And like you say, it's not really a taste. It's another quality, if you like, another dimension.
No, you're absolutely right. Quite tannic. You getting anything relating to fruit at all? Would you say red fruit, cherries or plums, or black fruit, black currant or black plums? Any spice, pepper, things like
cherry, if anything.
Tastes dark.
It is cherry.
Tastes dark to me. Tastes like black cherry. The black cherries, and you're getting black cherry yogurt.
By God, it is. You absolutely nailed it, and I am not imagining it. That's absolutely what it is. Ski yogurt, 1980. Quite awful. Quite awful, but the only thing available at the time.
That's fair. And you're right. This is quite a simple wine. It's the Wine Society's French Syrah. We've looked it up, and it's being sourced from the area around Creuse-Hermitage, which is a kind of large flat area in the Northern Rhone, very different to those exclusive kind of crus that you get. You get crus in the Northern Rhone, or like in the Southern Rhone that we discussed, previously, where the wines can be, catastrophically expensive, Côte Rôtie and Hermitage. We don't have the budget, I'm afraid, to taste those. But, this is a good thing. You can get wines at an affordable level. Admittedly, the quality isn't going to be quite as good, but this is a decent-ish wine, I would say. The only comment I would say is that the tannins, as you say, they're a little bit aggressive, and they slightly dominate the wine, I'd say. Let's just pause on the French and fly off, 10,000 miles to South Australia, where this Shiraz will have been made. The other thing about Australia as well, they don't get hung up on appellation contrôlée. Oh, we'll come to that in a sec. But let's smell and taste the Australian Shiraz. So we've already said it's there's something a bit chemistry set going on. So, okay. Let's taste.
Oh, what is it? It's almost like the inside of a 1970s Morris Minor. Well, less tanniny. I put the mortgage on that.
Correct.
And I don't know whether I like that more or less. I didn't mind the tannin. There's something about that tannin wallop that was like, whoa, I'm getting something here for my money.
And you're right, the tannins, winemakers can do things to extract lots of tannin or less tannin. And if you want to make a wine that's commercially appealing to a wide mass market, you don't want big aggressive tannins. You know, the population at large don't like them. No. And I suspect that's what's gone on with this wine, because Syrah/Shiraz does generally have quite high tannins, kind of medium to high levels of tannin. That's normal for this grape variety. Quite a thick skin, so a lot of tannin going on there. Tannins that you sell in this wine is quite low, so I expect there's been a bit of clever jiggery pokery going on in the winery, possibly.
There's a bitterness, I'm afraid. There's a slight bitterness to the afters, which I'm not a massive fan of. Let me just try and get some flavours again. Oh, what is it?
I think it's sort of black currant, black plums, and something a tiny bit chocolatey, but again, I could be imagining that. And I know what you mean, Ol. If the finish of wine number 2, the Australian Shiraz, it's quite a long finish, but it's not a particularly pleasant finish, because what I'm finding is that the kind of, definitely the generic sort of dark, spicy black fruit, it's not very spicy. The French Syrah is spicier, I think. I'm definitely putting my mortgage on black fruit, black plums, black currant. I find the fruit kind of goes quite quickly, but the acidity and yes, I think it's the acidity and perhaps the slight sourness or bitterness sort of is the hallmark of the finish. So, and that can trip people up sometimes. I think, oh, this wine's got a really long finish. I said, well, yeah, but is it a pleasantly long finish?
Yeah.
And I would argue that it's not a pleasantly long finish. But again, you know, we are talking about a wine that's under a tenner that's come halfway across the world. Which one do you prefer and why?
It's the French. I'm absolutely convinced. I wanted to like the Australian one because you know, up the new world and everything, and I love the Australian story. But the tannins don't bother me, and I actually quite like them. It makes me feel like I'm getting a full hit of flavour, and the aftertaste is much nicer. You get a sort of more complete fruitiness in the mouth. The nose very similar, but I would go for the French, I think.
That is interesting. And again, I know we're talking about Australia and we love Australia and Australian wine. I would agree with you. I'm not mad on either wine, but, you know, especially. But if I had to take one, I would take the French one. For the reasons you've already said, it's actually got a bit more character than the Australian wine, which is a bit, as I said, it's a bit slightly chemically, slightly commercial, I think. But for me, the fact that where the tannins going on and some of the fruit and the spice, and there's more spice in the French wine, I just think it's a bit more interesting. Our hermit crab, which was only a couple of pounds more, and of course a white wine blend, £11.50, was in a different class, actually, wasn't it? Even though obviously we're not comparing apples with apples here.
Well, not, but you did talk about this a lot last time, and it made me think, you know, about value over quality, if you like, and because we've all got a budget. And, you know, you said that the best fiver you could spend was, you know, upgrading to a Premier Cru. Maybe a Grand Cru might not even be worth getting that extra layer.
Yeah, in Chablis, going from Chablis, ordinary Chablis, to upgrading to, you know, kind of premium economy or
yes, maybe that's a great analogy, because I don't think I have travelled first once, and was it worth double premium economy? No, to me. And although I do like white wine, that first wine, was in a different league to both the reds, but you know, for £7 or £8, that French Syrah is lovely. And also, I'm probably being a bit hard on the Australian Shiraz, but it was nice for you to mention sourness and bitterness in the finish, which it was nice that you'd also noticed the same thing, and I'd said it first, so that was very rewarding.
Well, you know, I'm quite impressionable, me, so I was just hanging on your every word, dear boy.
Excellent. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think perhaps what we should just go on to say for a couple of minutes before we wrap up all is what the influence of the new wave of New World that really kicked off in the 80s with regard to Australia, what that has done reciprocally in the old world, because it actually is quite interesting. I mentioned earlier how Australia doesn't worry too much about Appellation Contrôlée. Basically, in Australia, it's up to, and pretty much all of the New World, if you want to plant grape variety X here or there, you can do it. You haven't got rules saying you can't plant those varieties here, and if you do, you've got to restrict the yields to make them really low, which is by restricting the yield of fruit, you're getting better concentration of grapes and therefore better wine. People know that in the New World, and they may choose to do it, but they're not being forced to do it by regulations. That's the point. There's much more freedom in the New World. The kind of basic thing is, when it comes to appellation rules, if you're in the Old World, basically you probably can't do it, and in the New World, everything goes. In a sense that you've got the freedom, which is great. But that doesn't mean that terroir and appellation contrôlée in France is a terroir-driven system based on grape varieties that perform best in the best conditions, the best soils, the best climate, and all the rest of it. That doesn't mean that Australian, New Zealand, Americans, South Africans, South Americans ignore that. It's just that they're just a bit freer to do what they want. Now, what is interesting is, if we go back to France, and we've been in the Northern Rhone talking about the Syrah, and also those grape varieties in the Australian white wine, the hermit crab, the Viognier and the Marsanne, which come from the Northern Rhone in France. It's not that far from the Northern Rhone to Languedoc, the Languedoc in southern France, which is a huge area of Mediterranean, just inland from the Mediterranean France, almost going down to the Spanish border. There's a little bit before the Spanish border called Roussillon. But Languedoc, vast area, and there the main kind of grape varieties, it's red wine territory generally. Let's just talk about red wine to make it simpler. It's Grenache and Syrah blended with another grape called Mourvèdre, but let's not worry about Mourvèdre. GSM, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre. That dominates the scene in the Languedoc within the appellation contrôlée system, because the appellation contrôlée says these grapes, Grenache and Syrah and Mourvèdre, do really well in this pretty warm Mediterranean climate. And we want you to grow these grapes only because that's respecting the terroir of the Languedoc. Fine. However, only 25% of wines in the Languedoc are within the appellation contrôlée system. There's a looser... I know, bear with me all, because I know we had it all neatly tied up with terroir.
Yes, I know. This is what you're due to me constantly
I know.
with this stupid subject. Is I go, I get it. Oh, appellation contrôlée, that makes a lot of sense. And then you go, except...
Yes, and these are the vagaries of the wine world. It's just such a deep ocean. But just hear me out, because it's really relevant to Australia and the New World. Because only 25% of the area under vine in the Languedoc is within the appellation contrôlée system, it means 3/4 isn't, obviously, which means that it's part of a looser system, which is called IGP, Indication Géographique Protégée. These rules, by the way, are not just for France. It's a European Union, Europe-wide thing. So you basically have your tightest rules, which in France are called appellation contrôlée. Then your less tight rules, which is called IGP, Indication Géographique Protégée. This is in France. And there's even something even looser than that, but let's not worry about that. But the point is, outside the appellation system, you have freedom as a grower of grapes and a winemaker to do funky stuff that you could only get away with in the New World. And that's really important, because when Australia, New Zealand, Chile particularly, to a certain extent South Africa and later Argentina, started really hitting the markets and doing brilliantly on kind of, quote, old world markets, the reaction was for people in the Languedoc, particularly because so much of the Languedoc is not under appellation contrôlée control, to start doing what the New World were doing. So, surprise, surprise, you suddenly started seeing 100% Cabernet Sauvignons, 100% Syrahs or blends with funky labels, trendy labels, nice names, labels that told you what was going on inside the bottle. Basically, the New World was born in the Old World in southern France because of what the New World were doing.
Which is good in a way, isn't it? It's sort of democratic, right? It's like taking away we love French wines in France, but it's taking away the sort of monopoly and the mystique and breaking that down to a certain extent.
Exactly. Which is what we're doing in this podcast, getting rid of the mystique.
Yeah, that's right. Whilst not, and you're very keen on this, I know, whilst not getting rid of the, the indefinable qualities of wine. So not trying to apply so many rules that it becomes a bland science, but breaking down some of the mysteries of it so that you can be a bit more confident about the wine that you're ordering. That's exactly the reason we're doing this.
Exactly right.
Excellent.
Okay, getting close to wrap, but take-home messages from this ep, please.
Love your mention of rap. Like we're total professionals in this game. I love it. So before we wrap, I've learnt loads. Loved it. What I like the story. I like the story of the rebellious younger sibling making waves in the world. The Australians being at the vanguard of this, and the reliance of the old on the new and the other way around. So without the old world, the new world would never have been able to have the confidence to start taking over the market and providing us as the consumer with so many more options. So a lot of the old world learnings from centuries have had to be applied in the new world. But there's also been the other way around, in that the success of the New World wines has forced the Old World to, in some ways, relax some of the rules and sort of be a little bit more transparent about the product, and also be a bit more experimental to come up with new ways to, fight off the competition. And competition in this context seems to me to be always good, because people have to keep on experimenting to come up with new things that are both absolutely delicious and at a price point that more and more people can afford. A great swathe of the New World story has happened within our lifetime. I mean, the great experiment in Paris in 1976 happened when we, as you say, were just coming out of short trousers. So what a revolution in such a relatively short period of time, when put up against the amount of time we've been making wine. But what an extraordinary story. Interesting, though, that in our little experiment, the Old World won, which is quite an interesting takeaway. So there's life in the old dog yet. Right, so just before we go on, food pairings, because we had that rather successful one with the Riesling, pronounced correctly, last week. And because I'm veggie, only for 2 years, but fairly committed, but I try not to be a pain in the backside veggie. I just quite like the idea of being a veggie. So I found this website called ohmyveggies.com, which is a great name, but it also has some good food pairings in it. It said about Riesling, actually. It said Thai, Vietnamese, Southwestern food, barbecue sauce, interestingly. And, that kind of links a little bit to the sushi idea.
Yeah.
So it's not a million miles away from what you were talking about and me and Louise experimented with. And it does have some for the full-bodied high tannin syrah, it says. It's saying olives, which I quite like, barbecue, grilled or roasted vegetables, yum yum, with bold sauces, Parmesan cheese, and it says, and it's got a link to the Sweetest Kitchen for cauliflower steaks with olive and herb salsa, which I quite fancy a cauliflower steak. They're not bad,
I've heard they're good, actually, but I haven't tried one, so we must try that at some point. That would be brilliant. And well done, Ol. And because I was thinking of you and other vegetarians, particularly when we're talking about Syrah stroke Shiraz, because it's such a big, bold, gutsy wine, and it's the sort of wine you'd have with a steak, or in Australia you get Aussie beef poi. Your Aussie beef poi and chips would be fantastic.
God, that sounds hearty as hell.
Yeah. Yes, I remember a girl in a cafe saying that, and I think, well, got to have one of those. But yeah, I was thinking, if you're vegetarian, how are you going to pair Shiraz stroke Syrah? So that sounds fantastic. Cauliflower steaks, etc. Well done, Ol, for extra homework there. And just to quickly, before we wrap up, just to tell folks about the next ep, which is going to be episode 6. We are going to focus a little bit on viticulture and winemaking. Oliver, don't yawn or fall asleep. We're going.
I
you
love
it. Good. Sounds a little bit kind of schoolroomy, but actually really, really interesting. Building on your burgeoning knowledge of terroir, 30-50, climate, all the rest of it, great varieties, which ones can grow where, and this whole this whole tension between the skill of the growing the grapes and the genius of what goes on inside the winery, because of course you need both. So we're going to discuss that next week with 2 wines. So yeah, we're going to be tasting a South African Chenin Blanc 2019 made from old vines, details on the website. And we're also going to be discussing, I think, one of the most underrated wines in the world, and that is Beaujolais, which has some interesting slants on winemaking, part of our ep next time. So, Ol, it just leaves it for me to go and pick up my violin and for you to give us your quick reflections on this ep.
Well, yeah, thank you. I'm going to have another small glass of the hermit crab and invite my wife to have a taste of that as well. I think she will love it as much as I do. That is my tip for the series so far. I think it's absolutely delicious. Richard, again, you have guided me through 3 more really interesting wines, and I've learned an awful lot about the New World and what the influence it's having on the wine drinking that we're enjoying now here in the 3rd decade of the 21st century. Look forward to seeing you in episode 6, old chum, and thank you very much for the education, the continued education that you're giving me throughout this series. Have fun, everyone, and see you next time.